Hey guys, what's up? Inksmith back again, and today I got a bit of a sad one for you. I guess a bit of a sad one and maybe a bit of a moral to the story, a bit of a insight on a dark future some could have if they don't get outside of their head and take a look at their own problems and try to fix themselves over time. This is the story of Lowtax. If you don't know who Lowtax is, he was the ex-owner of a little website you might know if you're my same age called Something Awful. Something Awful was a site like You're the Man Now Dog, and it would have things like E-Bombs World where it would be like flashing memes. It was pretty much your first meme type site, and it had a forum too. That forum was the equivalent to like a 4chan forum where you could discuss a little bit of everything. But before any of that started, where did Lowtax, the creator of the website, get his start? Well, he started out in college majoring in things like web design, IT, and things like that. He wasn't really enjoying it too much, so he dropped out and he decided to go into working for a company that made Quake levels. Now, you're probably wondering, what's Quake levels if you're unfamiliar with Quake or Doom or id Software? Well, pretty much when things like Doom, the original Doom, came out, even Wolfenstein, if you want to go back that far, it was very, very easy to make levels for those games. In fact, you may remember the Columbine shooting had a level made by the shooters that was a direct copy of their school so they could practice the shooting within Doom. Now, if that's really true or not, no one's ever really found out, but the fact that it could happen was very real. You could make any kind of level you wanted, and Quake was no different. People did that. They made their own levels. He worked at a website where they did the same thing. They also wrote reviews on different things added to Quake. This would be like mods. This would be pretty much like a Steam discussion area or a Steam mod workshop before Steam even existed. This is way, way back when the internet was still in its infancy, and a site like this was pretty amazing because there wasn't a place online where you could download these. In fact, this was still a time where if you wanted to get extra levels for your Quake game or Doom game, you went to a store like Barnes & Noble and bought a book that had a CD in the back that would teach you how to make the levels and also let you try out levels of other people. So having this online was very unique. It did really well, but Lowtax didn't really get along with the crew that he was working with there because even though he would write these articles about different Doom mods and Doom levels or Quake mods and Quake levels, some of the other writers that were there had to also write stuff that he didn't like, in the sense that they just weren't as good of writers as him. He was a talented guy. He had a lot of humor in what he wrote. He was quick-witted. And what eventually happened was one of the people who constantly wrote bad articles, he would constantly have to look over her articles and correct them again and again. And one day he wrote a whole article about how he was sick of her articles being written at the company and that she was the worst writer the entire company had. And he published it on the company's website. He was later called into the office by the owner of the company and found out that the woman he had written this on was the niece of the CEO. So this didn't go over too well, and he was immediately fired. He had to sign an NDA. He was given 1 month of pay, and this was the time where he went off on his own and started to create Something Awful. Something Awful was a phrase, a catchphrase, a motto that he would constantly say about things he was talking about he didn't like. He would always say, that was something really awful, or that was something awful. So he thought, why don't I make a website mocking everything that I find awful? And that's what he did. At first, it wasn't really going too well for him. It didn't really make any money, and he'd have to work a full-time job just to support hosting on the website while also working on the website completely for free. He was literally losing money to keep people's stupid posts up, but they were funny posts. They were posts that were endearing and had somewhat of the wit of like old school Vine, memes of today, or things that just gave you a good chuckle when you came home from work and had had a bad day. So what eventually got Lowtax to finally try to get the site running on a profitable level was an offer from two different companies that were supposed game key companies, which means like you buy a game key from them. One was called GameFan. The second one, I forget the subsidiary's name, but it was where they sold keys for games that were like pre-sold or pre-owned, and you could use them to then purchase the game. Unfortunately, even though he ran the ads for GameFan, he never got paid for them. And later he found out while reading the contract that he had been duped. They had actually written within the contract that they never even owed anyone any money who advertised them on their site. Surprisingly, the company still failed, and he continued his by paying from his own hard work at a full-time job. But his first attempt at putting ads on the site did not work. Slowly, he eventually realized that he was getting a lot of spam bots on the site. He was getting a lot of all kinds of crazy mail ads and spammers putting stuff all over the forums. So Lowtax decided a very small price put on entering into the forums would allow him not only to garner a more loyal fan base, but possibly even support the site. So that's what Lowtax did. He made it a $10 fee to join the site and use the forums in whole. And this surprisingly worked out really well. He literally had hundreds of thousands of people joining the site and talking all the time. And this also eliminated any spam or spam bots from the site, because obviously those people aren't going to pay to spam because they would lose money. It cleaned up the site significantly, made it look more professional, and also now became a main source of income for Lowtax, and he could now run Something Awful full-time instead of having to work a full-time job aside from also run the website. On top of it, he met a new friend named Shmorky, who was a talented animator on Newgrounds, who he brought over to animate for his Something Awful website. Unfortunately, later down the line, and maybe we'll go into this in a future video, Shmorky turned out to be a bit of a creepy guy, like a diaper furry pedo who he eventually had to part ways with. You can't really blame Lowtax for having to cut ways with Shmorky, but the thing that did help the website when Shmorky was there was his animation was really good and brought in even more viewers and made the website even more popular. Now he was growing almost into the millions with the amount of people using the website and the amount of money he was making from the website. In fact, he was doing so good that he started to get offers from big companies who would want to buy it. But Lowtax would not sell it, and he said that he thoroughly enjoyed the company. During this time, he also met one of his first wives. He had been dating for a while with a woman that he had actually met on the forum, and they got married and had their first child. Unfortunately, this didn't work out, and it was later revealed that there was some sort of fight that had gone down one night in which she had left the house and would have called the police and had him separated from his child they had had together. Now, at first, Lowtax completely denied this. He said this is totally false. No charges were pressed, and eventually this kind of died out. So people didn't quite believe the first time they heard about this happening. But not long after this, Lowtax started dating another person who he met while at a convention that was connected to the Something Awful forums. Now, this lady did not know quite as much about Something Awful. She had heard about it, of course, before, but was not a user of the website. But later, after they started dating and finally got married, she became a mod on this. Now, thinking that she would be a horrible mod because she had never seen the website before or used it was the wrong idea. She turned out to be quite good at what she did, and she actually even fixed up a lot of the deprecation and dilapidating aspects of the forum, being a mod that better controlled things and ran it more professionally. In fact, so much so that she started to look for more professional ads, more professional vendors, and more professional things to do with the website. Unfortunately, at this point, Lowtax seemed pretty disconnected from the website that he himself had made. He had actually tried to run different ads as far as a juice that he enjoyed, and he had got yelled at for placing ads all over. He was then angry at his own audience for not enjoying the ads for a juice that he liked and scolded them like they were small children, and they didn't take too well to this. And He also needed to get a lot more security on the website. He needed to get a lot more partners invested into the website. And this is something his new wife tried to get him to do, but he refused and he never really let the website grow. He never updated it. It still looked like it was something from the early 1990s. It looked like it was a dial up website and it wasn't really maturing as the internet did. This led to fights between him and his new wife, who had just recently also had a kid with him. He now has two daughters at this point, and unfortunately, we see the same thing play out where she leaves the house one night after getting into a row of a fight with Lowtax. Of course, there was other stories before this too where he had done some pretty strange things. For example, one night when he took his wife out to a Chinese restaurant, he proceeded to drink enough alcohol to get so inebriated that he began going on a loud rant in the Chinese restaurant talking about how government spies were after him. It was so belligerent and so sort of schizophrenic that his wife began to break down and cry at the Chinese restaurant, begging him to stop. She was pregnant with his baby at the time, and this was really disconcerting in her first vision of what Lowtax could act like when he was under the influence. This eventually did lead to them splitting up as well, but this time his new wife and his ex-wife joined together to, I guess, make a partnership to finally get money from being with him and dealing with his abuse. Now, you can have your own thoughts as far as whether or not you feel Lowtax should have been sued or given alimony. If nothing else, he should pay for his children's education. I think we can all agree to that. And that is the other thing that they wanted out of him, to help them pay for bills, especially due to the fact that they were now single mothers taking care of his kids on their own. This didn't work out quite as well, and there was a lot of court procedures going forward. There was even multiple streams in which Lowtax came on and tried to defend himself and talk about how he was not guilty of any of these matters. He had never hit a woman, never beat a woman, never touched a woman in the wrong way, never broken out into a wild rant or screamed and raved. But as his life continued, this started to appear to not be the truth. I'd say it really began when he had a major back injury and was diagnosed with having blown out one of his vertebrae on his back and had to have surgery, after which he, of course, had to take pain medication to manage the pain of a repairing disc in his back. But at the same time, it seems like after this point is where he really got addicted to opioids. And this happens to lead to a greater downfall than I was ever imagining would happen for Lowtax. There were people who tried to reach out. For example, the owner of Kiwi Farms tried to help him with his website and even talked to his ex-wife at one point, trying to get Lowtax to convert the site to a new, updated, running new types of software that it would allow it to enter the new aughts instead of looking like a 1990s site. This did not work out as well either. Neither would his security suggestions or his new forum rules that would allow him to better modernize and run his site. On top of this, another thing starting to drive Lowtax a bit nuts was some of the members on the site were driving the entire thing into the toilet by doing crazy things like threatening the president, threatening to kill major politicians, so much so to the point that the FBI visited his house and questioned Richard Kayaka, or Lowtax as you know him, because that's how I've called him for most of this video. When they did come, he actually went on the forums after that and yelled at everyone and went into a loud rant and rave. See, the thing is, though, the owner of Kiwi Farms, Josh, had actually tried to implement certain things that would help him weed out the bad characters, or at the very least, filter things that would trigger an FBI raid if they were being posted within his forum. But Lowtax was not concerned with this and wanted to run things his way. Lowtax, while a great inventor and creator of a website that did quite well for a while, was turning out to be someone who was not open to change. At this point, change was something he really needed because his life was starting to fall apart. He was addicted to opioids, drinking massive amounts of alcohol, and losing complete contact with the members of his site. He also had lost his wife and his kids, who had moved away and would no longer see him anymore or hang out with him while he did his internet live streams. In fact, live streams were the last few things that he had left with interaction with the outside world. These turned into rambling online gameplay, some of which were so bad that during the time that his wife left him, he merely did a stream that was a JPEG or a GIF of a dog puking over and over again while he rambled and cried about having lost connection to his wife and kids. I get sharing with your audience some of the pain that you're going through. I've done it myself when I was diagnosed with COVID and was struggling through that. But there's just certain things that you probably shouldn't share, especially when it deals with legal things that you're going to solve. And this would actually play out later within legal aspects of his life, because during this time, there was a class action lawsuit from his two ex-wives and kids attempting to get money to pay for minor things like housing, like education, like a college fund that would support them in the future. But he was not willing to pay any of these and fought them on every point. He was also completely disconnected from a lot of the people on the website that he had made, so much so that he was finally convinced to sell it by another member who wanted to run it a bit differently and finally modernize Something Awful. So, Lowtax did finally sell Something Awful, the last big thing about his life. At 45 at this point, he is severely overweight, addicted to pain pills, drinking alcohol on the daily. Everyone in his life has left him. His daughters, who used to come on his live stream with him, refuse to now because he was starting to use them to beg for money. And his live streams were only pulling in about 10 to 9 watchers at a time, which is kind of sad for someone who had run a massive forum full of people frenzied at every word he had to say. It was becoming a very sad scene, and it was becoming a very desperate situation for Lowtax. He had made a lot of money by selling the website, but all that money was up in the air and ready to be taken by the court at any minute to pay off his wife and his kids so that they could afford things like basic needs and education. So what does Lowtax do in this situation? Does he finally convince himself to get sober, go to rehab, work on himself, become a better person, start a new business? No. As I told you in the past, Lowtax seemed to be a person who could never change. And instead of being happy that he could finally move on and get away from Something Awful and start a new venture in his life, he instead decided to go on a spending spree with the money he had made from selling the website. What did he buy on this spending spree? Gourmet cookies, Uber Eats, visiting theme parks, playing video games. He spent so much in such a short amount of time that the courts had decided that he had gone out of his way to be negligent with his money and try to spend as much as possible so that he could not give anything to his kids and his ex-wives. Now, I can understand some people out there are been through a really bad divorce and maybe gotten more money than they ever wanted to give to somebody in a divorce and are like, yeah, that's right, a man should get to keep his money when he's getting divorced from a wife and they always try to steal it. Okay, I've heard this kind of story before, and I have seen both women and men screwed over in divorces as far as money is concerned. But kids, the kids are innocent in this. You can be angry at each other as a couple, but the kids still deserve money for their education and to be cared for, because that's why you have kids. They are that responsibility. And if you have money that you can offer them a better life with, it would be best spent on that. You're not going to be here forever, and we're no longer buried with material things like ancient Egyptian mummies. So why do you need to go spend all that money on gourmet food and Uber Eats? But that's what Lowtax did. Now, the court went through no matter what, even though Lowtax was refusing to show up to all the different court sessions they were having. And what did the judge decide? He decided in the favor of his ex-wives and kids and was ready to give all the money over to them. The next day, his ex-wives got a call from their joint lawyer who had let them know Lowtax had taken a Smith & Wesson revolver, held it to his mouth, and shot himself. That's right. At 45 years old, addicted to painkillers, drunk every night, live streaming to 10 people, Lowtax decided it was time to end himself rather than pay it forward and get his life together. This ends tragically. No one wins. He lost his life, the women and his kids, lost all the money that he spent, and anything he would have had for a fund for their education is gone. And so is the man who created something awful. You know, the weirdest thing is looking back through a log of everything Lowtax did, there was one time where he worked for a very small gaming site. And this is not the Quake one I talked about earlier. There's a small gaming site that he worked for that he wrote articles for. And him and the other guy who wrote the articles on there were both really humorous and kind of dissed games all the time, made really funny reviews and stuff like that. But the guy he worked with at the time had a really bad addiction to meth and cocaine, and was constantly like up and down as far as being bipolar and schizophrenic was concerned. Like he literally had those mental conditions. And Lowtax finally had to leave the company because the guy running it became too unstable. And when he did leave, he wrote the guy a long message that he read online that was really sympathetic and told him, you'll be a better person one day as soon as you clean yourself up and get your life together and, you know, get out there in the real world and start to talk to people more and start to obsess over drugs left. You'll become a better person. Sadly, that man killed himself, the man he wrote those articles with, before he could ever give him that letter. And the weirdest thing is, Lowtax watched this happen at the gaming site that he was at before he started something awful. And then it became his destiny as well. Very strange to watch go down, like history repeating itself with two people very close together. It's a sad situation. It didn't leave anyone with good memories or good thoughts. It really only left us with something awful. No pun intended. I've been the Inksmith today, and I would love to hear your comments on this. Did you ever visit the website Something Awful? Have you ever heard of Lowtax before? Most people have not. They don't know he's the actual face behind the website. Do you know anything about this story from the past? What could he have done to better correct his life? Have you seen other people in your life go through this same situation where everything falls apart and instead of trying to repair it, they destroy what they have left? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, I hope you have a great rest of the day.